Welcome back to the Ringdown Podcast. I'm Hope Escobar, Community Risk Reduction Specialist with Roanoke Fire-EMS.
And I'm Casey Fury, Firefighter Paramedic. Today, we're talking about something that affects all of us, whether you're a firefighter, a first responder, or just a member of the community, and that's emergency management. Being ready before disaster strikes is critical, and that's exactly what our guests today specialize in.
Medic freeze on scene.
Second line, knockdown the exterior fire.
Joining us today is Chief Trevor Shannon, Battalion Chief of Emergency Management, and Firefighter EMT Todd Whalen, who both play a key role in keeping Roanoke prepared. Before we jump into the details, let's start with some introductions. Can you each share a little bit about yourselves, your background, and what brought you into the world of emergency management?
Yeah, so I'm Trevor Shannon. I'm a Battalion Chief of Emergency Management, like Casey said, and Special Operations as well.
So I was actually grew up in New Jersey, in a small town in New Jersey, and my dad was a volunteer firefighter up there in New Jersey. So I was kind of born into the fire service, if you will. But I did attend Roanoke College, where I got a business administration degree, and that's where I kind of realized that I wanted to be in the fire service and a part of emergency management, ultimately volunteering while I was at Roanoke College with the Fort Lewis Fire Department, and then getting hired here in the city in 2004. So it's been a great career for me.
I ended up in emergency management. I've been a firefighter for the city of Roanoke since 2004. Started kind of working on a degree back in 2009 and then finished it up here in 2018. In emergency management, I've really enjoyed the field of the fire service, but I also wanted to do a little bit more with the coordination and the behind-the-scenes work that brings all these entities together for public safety and first responders for the community. So I've really enjoyed the role in emergency management, and we'll talk a lot more about that as we get through this. So thank you for having us today.
The three of us actually grew up within an hour and a half of each other and now all work in the same department, all transplants.
As Casey said, I'm Todd Whalen. I'm a firefighter EMT at Station 6 on A shift. Station 6, for listeners who don't know, is in southeast Roanoke. It also houses our technical rescue and swiftwater equipment and teams. A little bit more about me. I've been in the city and at Station 6 for about 4 years now. Grew up about an hour outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, that's where I grew a love for the fire service. Came down for Liberty University, continued volunteering and developing my love for the fire service, and began to really become interested in emergency management. Continued with my master's degree in emergency management, and really just found how I like the planning and the logistical aspect of emergency management and how I can coordinate that into emergency services and really help the community that way.
Thank you guys for sharing more about your backgrounds and for being here, taking the time to tell us more about what you guys do every day. So let's get into it. Emergency management is something a lot of people don't fully understand, so we'll kind of go over the basics to begin. When people hear emergency management, they might think of disasters like hurricanes or wildfires, but it's so much more than that. Can you guys break it down a little bit for us and talk about what emergency management really means in the city of Roanoke?
Yeah, so I think it's important first to know that, I tend to get a lot of phone calls that are kind of more fire service related or police related, and that is related to a particular issue. So we're not emergency services coordinators by any means. Emergency management in the city of Roanoke focuses on 5 pieces, and that's prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery during a disaster or a major incident. And so we work closely with all of our community partners, whether that's nonprofits, businesses, industry, hospitals, healthcare, all the different pieces that make up a community, school systems, all these different components of our community, and we work to mitigate any hazards that happen in the city. There's hazard mitigation planning. There's all kinds of plans that we're involved in ahead of an event, and then post-event, we are responsible for the response and recovery during disaster. So we help to coordinate and put all the right people in a response to help recover from that incident. And then the recovery phase is the other piece that a lot of people don't understand, and that could take years. So Hurricane Helene is a prime example where the recovery phase is going to take years to get our community, but also a lot of our communities southwest of us here in Virginia, back to what we would consider normal. And so that's a challenging piece of emergency management, where we might deal with a disaster for 2, 3, 4, and 5 years versus the responders who go out and respond to the incident, and then they move on to the next one within a few hours.
I think a big part with your role that a lot of people don't understand is that you are the emergency manager for the entire city, not just the fire department, right? So you are involved in all types of events and situations that have nothing to do with the city fire department or have any of our assets involved that you are constantly tied into, which is, I think, a big part of your job that often we don't see as much being, field staff.
That's right. That's a good point. And I think it's good that Todd wore his appropriate emergency management shirt today, because while we both do work for the fire department, ultimately the director of emergency management for the city of Roanoke is our city manager. And so when I go to meetings, a lot of times I have to kind of cover up my fire and EMS patch and say, look, I work for all of you. I don't only work for the fire and EMS department. I want to work with each of you equally as much as our other departments. And so while I do work for the fire department, I'm certainly there to assist other departments within the city, whether that's social services, the school system, the police department, and all the other agencies that are involved in disasters and emergency management, right? So the most recent winter storm event with a lot of power outages and trees down, that's a conglomerate of Parks and Rec and Public Works and Transportation and all these different partners that are a big part of the response and recovery to a disaster.
Awesome. So with working with so many different departments, how do you guys make sure everyone's on the same page? Can you guys kind of walk us through what proactive planning looks like to make sure that you guys are all calibrated when it comes to that response?
Yeah, so first and foremost, it starts in the very beginning, building relationships, right? And so whether I'm in a meeting with 1 or 2 people or 10 people, my goal is to build relationships with everybody within the community that could be a part of these responses, so that I know who to call when something happens, or whether that's our Deputy Emergency Management Coordinator, Laura Schmidt, or whether it's one of our field EM specialists like Todd that can know who to call and have the right phone numbers. But then also it's, COVID has kind of changed emergency management, right? So pre-COVID, it was, we bring 20 people into a room and we have a meeting and we discuss things and we go from there. But now with Teams and all the different components that came out of COVID, Teams has enabled us to have virtual emergency operations centers and virtual meetings on a fairly regular basis. And so during an event or a storm, we have a lot of conference calls, and we might spend, 4 or 5 hours on conference calls planning for these events. But that's putting the right people in the meeting and in the room, whether it's, virtual or not. And having those discussions and making sure that everybody has the right equipment, the right personnel and staffing to respond.
So Todd, you and I had the privilege of working together for a pretty good period of time at number 6, and Chief is kind of at a different point in his career, right? He's in charge. He's more of a 9 to 5 with extended hours a lot of times. But you still being field staff, 24-hour shift. What does it look like for you, kind of wearing both hats when we have an event come up, right? You're HTR, you're Swiftwater, but you're also EM, so you kind of have that additional role. So how does that kind of play out?
Yeah, great question. So it's a hard balance to achieve. Trevor and Laura do a great job trying to get me involved, and I have great support from my battalion chief, Chief Purdue, on allowing me to enter those roles and attend those events. So if it's a special event that we know is coming up, then I'm usually assigned a part of the logistical section or plans section, and I can kind of help facilitate radios or any logistical needs that the attendants or participants of the event will have. If it's in reference to a deployment or disaster, I usually take on logistics and complete all of the ICS forms and the FEMA forms that have to get done that no one really likes to do, make sure that everyone's fed and make sure that our communications are set up and ready to go in any event that we have.
We are incredibly thankful for you doing all the forms. On our one deployment to Floyd, you and I roomed together, and there was so much more on your plate that you had to take care of that I ever realized in terms of forms, meetings, tracking events, expenditures, all these things, while the rest of us are like, all right, let's go do things. You have all this background as well as being ready, to gear up, put your stuff on, and get in the game as well.
As someone who hasn't been on deployment with you guys before on specialty teams, what are some of the key things that you guys need to bring, like think about whether you're staging in the station waiting to be deployed or whether you're going somewhere? Like, can you just kind of walk through that process of what that looks like and how you guys prepare for that?
Of course. So the last winter storm that we had kind of opened our eyes up to some things that we didn't have that we needed. So usually our deployments are during hurricane season because Roanoke City likes to flood, and we have a lot of flood threat to our city. With winter storms being obviously in cold weather, we needed to prepare for how to stay warm when we enter the water. So and how do we keep our victims warm? Because that's a big part that we want to make sure that even though once we get them out of the water, we want to make sure that we still continue care for them. Some things that we might bring are we want to make sure that we have cots to sleep on, and we want to make sure that we have meals that are not perishable so that we can eat and water. We also bring first aid supplies, toiletries. We bring spare motors and anything that can repair something that can break. So we could bring spare boats and just extra fuel, things like that. That way we can make sure that we're prepared for any emergency that can happen when we're not close to the station. In terms of being in the station and just being on standby, we just want to make sure that we have everything ready to go, which we try to at all times be ready to roll out the door at any time, but just really make sure that all of our trucks are hooked up and everything's ready to go in case we get called.
I would say it's safe to say that we have learned something with every deployment. And Helene's big takeaway was communication. So now we have the availability of Starlink to set up in situations like that, so we're not ever in the dark again. And I know the Texas deployment years ago was eye-opening and kind of put us towards this 72-hour sustainability that we now currently have.
Awesome. So let's say a major emergency happens, whether it's a flood, a train derailment, or pretty much anything unexpected, because you guys are just always preparing for the unexpected. What's the first thing that probably you, Trevor, would be doing and getting your team ready to respond to that?
So typically what I'm thinking is behind the scenes, and that's, have all the right people been notified? So we'll take a recent train derailment, for example. I know that the teams we send out the door for fire and EMS and the police department and our public safety partners can manage an incident, right? We know that they're going to take care of the incident and they're going to mitigate the hazard and the threats and take care of those things. But the piece that I'm thinking of is, has the hospitals been notified that this is going on? Is there any concerns to those hospitals? We've done some tabletop exercises and training events with our local hospitals on whether a train derailment creates a hazmat situation and what does that do to the hospital and where we're going to transport patients, things like that. The other piece is the organization that might be involved. So we'll say that, let's say it's a Norfolk Southern situation. I'm the individual that should have a contact with them and can call them and say, hey, I know you guys are aware of this. Do you have any needs? Do you have anybody coming to the incident? Is there anybody we can coordinate with? And then the other piece is, a lot of times, of course, Hope, you do a great job of our social media, but there's these organizations such as Norfolk Southern or the Department of Emergency Management or Transportation through the state that you can't just share information for the locality without communicating with them. And so I'm going to try to help coordinate those resources and get the right people on the phone so that we can say, hey, this is the message we want to send out on behalf of Fire and EMS, but is your organization okay with that? Are you good with us sharing this? And then maybe it's hey, we're going to have to shut down 5 blocks here, and I'm going to try to coordinate that with our transportation division. These are things that the battalion chief that's on the scene in operations doesn't really have time or may not know the individuals that are responsible for those different parts getting done. And so I'm thinking behind the scenes, okay, yeah, I know I can call this person and get road closures taken care of. I know I can call this person and get this piece taken care of. So it's a lot of behind the scenes work. And then the other piece is, if we do have an evacuation or we have extreme temperatures like we did the other night and we had a gas leak in a facility, where are these people that have been evacuated? Where are they going to wait now to go back into their home or residence or business, whatever it might be? And so I might be reaching out to our bus companies to see if they can support that and provide a bus to sit on, to stay warm for a little while. It's a lot of just kind of behind the scenes work. We're thinking worst case scenario, if these guys are going to be evacuated, let's plan for them to be out here 30 minutes. But what if they're out here for 4 hours? Do we need to get them fed? Do we need blankets? Do we need, water, something like that? So.
We saw that recently. We had another CO incident at a large nursing home in Valley Metro was requested, and we're responding, and thankfully weren't needed. But, like you said, the battalion chiefs have so much on their plate in terms of operational goals, strategies, tactics to achieve a mission that a lot of times I feel like they know those things need to be done, but being able to have a battalion who is directly responsible for that and able to aid in that is huge, especially in a city the size of Roanoke, where things happen regularly, probably more than the public ever realizes is going on behind the scenes.
Sure, and I think that's a big part of it, right? Is building these relationships to have partners like that. But, I'm sure in other localities they may not have a great relationship with that bus provider, but our relationship with Valley Metro has been fantastic. They're very responsive. They're very supportive. They understand what our needs are and concerns and things like that. Another utility provider had an incident just recently where we weren't able to get through from our dispatch number to their phone. And so I was contacted by the on-duty battalion chief and asked if I had a contact with this provider. And that's what I had. I was able to offer that and made the connection, and they got somebody out there within 15 minutes. So those are the kind of things that I have to be focused on to make sure that we have those extra redundancies and backups for communications.
So the EM is kind of a different route. So our department, we always talk about, has all these things to offer, right? You can come in the department as a firefighter EMT, you can go become a medic, you can go to fire investigations, special operations, and then there's EM. If there was somebody that was thinking about wanting to kind of get into that track, what would you recommend them studying, looking into, talking to kind of start going down that route?
Well, I think big picture, I'll talk about a few pieces, and then I think I'll turn it over to Todd, who's recently kind of gone down this route. So me, I kind of came into it, I won't say blindly, but I had an interest in emergency management from a pretty early on in my career. And so I kind of started looking at the master's programs and went that route with college education and things like that. There's a whole nother piece of emergency management that we haven't really covered, and that's the planning piece, where Laura Schmidt, our deputy emergency management coordinator, spends a lot of her time doing emergency planning and plan reviews and special events planning and all these different pieces. So there's a whole piece of emergency management where it's really nice to have a response and recovery background. And then there's a whole nother piece where maybe you're just into reading and writing and you want to write plans and GIS. You can, yeah, exactly. GIS, 100%. So there's a couple different routes you can go, right? It kind of depends on what your focus is. But I think in the grand scheme of things, the Emergency Management Institute offers a lot of classes in preparedness and emergency management, all these different pieces. And so that's a good place to start. And I'm going to let Todd talk about some of the programs that he's been in, because he's gotten a really good fundamental base of knowledge now to kind of move forward in emergency management.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, and like how Trevor started, I started with a master's and came in with college education for it. Trevor's been awesome, and Chief Shannon's been awesome with helping me get into specific classes. So as a firefighter EMT or as a basic emergency responder, you have your basic incident command system classes. Then the first step would be then taking ICS 300 and 400, which dive into forms and some scenarios, some emergency management scenarios even further. And then once you get those done, I would recommend, and I've gone this route with going to the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, or FEMA's Basic Academy. That's a series of 5 classes. I think it's about 120 hours of classroom work. And it goes anything from just intro into emergency management, and then special events planning, and then it goes into public information and how to be a public information officer and talk to the media. So it kind of gives you a very well-rounded view of emergency management, and makes you a well-rounded employee for that.
And then anybody that wanted to pursue their master's, say you had a bachelor's, your program through Liberty was all online, right? You were able to do that while working a full-time job and now having a newborn at home.
Yeah. So, 100% online. I went to Liberty University for undergrad and grad school. It's been great to me. I've always recommended it to people, and I've talked to other people in the department who've gone to Liberty, and they highly recommend it too. I think it's great because it's self-paced. It definitely takes a lot of discipline with that framework, but definitely just you can do it on your own time. And I took one class at a time, took it nice and slow. Didn't want to overload myself, like you said, with a newborn or trying to get more technical rescue classes or anything like that. It was great to have that framework.
Todd says he doesn't want to overload himself, but anybody that doesn't know Todd personally, he is the most methodical and thought-out person and would regularly work on schoolwork in lieu of hanging out with myself or Jordan, because he was dedicated on going down this route and achieving his master's, which he finally did, which is awesome.
Finally.
So I know we're going to kind of shift gears here a little bit, but just transitioning over, our department has some really highly trained specialty teams like Swiftwater Rescue, HTR, which is heavy technical rescue for anyone who may not know, and a hazmat team as well. So how does emergency management kind of tie into their training and response for all of those teams, because they're all very different?
Yeah, so I've been fortunate with my role as the emergency management coordinator. I also have our special operations program under me, so it's worked out really well, because there's a really strong correlation between the Virginia Department of Emergency Management and all these specialty teams, right? So when we have a hurricane or a hazardous materials incident within our region, then our teams here that are made up of Roanoke County and the city of Salem, they will respond together regionally, so they can go up to an hour and a half away from the city of Roanoke on a response. And we've had that happen very recently on multiple different incidents. And that so how we help to coordinate all this is, number one, I try to attend meetings to support these folks that are on these teams, right? And so I want to make sure that they're represented at VDEM, but also represented here within the city. We've got a deputy chief that's very supportive, Chief Foley. I think you met him just on the first podcast, actually, and he's been very supportive of these teams and allowed us to kind of do some things that we hadn't been able to in the past. And so we're continuing to grow and get the trainings that we need for these teams to be the best that they can be. Our hazmat team is one of the busier ones in the state. There's only a handful of teams across the Commonwealth of Virginia, and so our team stays very busy, obviously, with our, whether it's rail, interstate, multiple interstates through the region, different things. And then the other piece, the HTR components, whether that's trench rescue, confined space rescue, rope rescue, then the list goes on and on and on. And so these guys are constantly trying to train, which they're doing today. They're doing a confined space entry today with one of our other utility partners in the city, and that's been great. So I was out there yesterday watching them participate in that exercise. But number one, it's making sure we're represented, and that's, again, with the Commonwealth of Virginia's Department of Emergency Management and great partnerships up there, and they're very supportive. We have one of the, our regional hazmat officer's fantastic. He's very supportive, and he's very good with our guys and make sure that they're trained to the level that they need. So really just kind of being that connection point to make sure that they have what they need and different connections are made and they're represented on different levels.
Coming from the team side, kind of how we view, or how I used to view, emergency management's role. I wasn't in emergency management when I started my technical rescue and Swiftwater time with Casey and in the department. For me, I always saw Trevor and Laura just behind the scenes planning a lot, whether like this last event getting Starlink and making sure we had all the supplies we needed and meals. I just saw them working hard to get all the supplies, making sure that we were taken care of so that we can go help the community. And that was a big help for us. And especially now with the support from Chief Foley and Chief Shannon, just really helping us get the supplies we need is huge.
Awesome. And do you guys have a story that you can share from maybe one of your deployments or a time that one of the teams were activated, maybe that you guys worked on together, that you guys can just kind of talk about?
Well, I think for me, Hurricane Helene is a perfect example where, Casey is, or, Todd is going, Casey's going, and these are guys that understand emergency management. They've spent time, working with me and understand what we're trying to do. Unfortunately, sometimes Todd gets pulled away from that response piece because I know that he is interested in the emergency management. And Casey talked about the forms earlier, and that's not always easy to do. But Hurricane Helene is a good example where this hurricane is tracking to kind of hit the city of Roanoke. And so I can't just say, okay, Roanoke, you're on your own. I'm going with the specialty teams. We're going to be in X county down the road. And so I have to stay here. So at this point, I'm like, hey, Todd, this is a good opportunity for you. I know it's a lot of work, but do you mind taking logistics and those forms with you to take care of that piece for us. And so it's kind of a partnership. And then he's relaying to me by phone call or text saying, hey, Chief, can we do this? Or can I send you this? Did you get this paperwork and different pieces like that? And so that worked out really, really well. Unfortunately for Todd, it takes him away from, he's not necessarily on that boat now going to make a rescue, but he's kind of overseeing that operation. And so it's a kind of a twofold piece. On a response, whether, a couple years ago we went to Richmond and I was able to go because we were not going to have impacts from this particular hurricane. And that's where it's a little different for me, is I really have to be kind of decisive on what I go on and what I don't go on, because if it's going to impact the city, I have to be representative here and partner with Laura and kind of work through emergency operation functions here. So Todd probably has a different perspective, but
I thought you hit it pretty well. One story I remembered was Casey brought up Floyd. We were on shift the day that we got told we were going to start preparing and probably go down to Floyd. And I remember Chief Shannon relayed through or asked Chief Perdue if I was available, and they made it work. And I came up to administration and hopped on some conference calls and was able to relay information that was in those conference calls. And then I could help in that aspect. And then went down and was with the team then and kind of handled everything on the EM side that the team needed, as Trevor and Chief Shannon stayed back and protected Roanoke.
Yeah, and there's a whole nother piece to all of this on the back end, right? So the teams come back, they clean up their gear, they go home to their families, and then they're back on shift the next day or two, where we're responsible for now getting reimbursed by the Commonwealth for that disaster response. And so there's some paperwork on the back end that takes, several weeks, sometimes a little bit longer, depending on how different periods of time fall with payroll and things like that. So, but yeah, these teams are supported by the state. So we're not sending our teams out, all the time with no reimbursement. There's cost recovery that's associated with that. And that's where we keep talking about these forms and this documentation, because if you don't have it, you're not going to get that money back to continue supporting these disasters and events.
Yeah, and I mean, from a team member stance, our team is hungry. We want to go everywhere and anywhere all of the time, and sometimes that is phone calls and text messages to Chief Shannon asking, hey, I see the east side of the state's looking at a big event, any chance of anybody moving? And I will say he is a strong advocate for us to be involved in the state. But there's a lot more. So some of our deployments are planned, right? We're watching a weather event come across, and then there's other ones that are more spontaneous. So you look at Hurley or Grundy, Virginia, 2 years in a row. And for those that are last minute, spur of the moment, there's a lot that has to get taken care of. And then you look at, you're just up and out. So Chief Perdue called us at 6 o'clock in the morning that, hey, get to the station, we're going to Grundy. And I had never heard of Grundy. And you kind of just up and leave. So something I wanted to touch on, it's kind of off base, is last podcast we talked about the family aspect. Mm-hmm. So you up and leave, and then you still have everything going on here. Well, this is a family, and you can rely on these guys for more than just helping you get stuff. So while I was in Grundy, my wife at the time suffered a medical emergency, went to the hospital, and then Chief Shannon went and sat with her for 3+ hours while we demobilized half our team, so I can come back and be with her. She go to surgery, and everything worked out for the best. But it's awesome to know that you have a chief that's going to have your back both professionally and personally and care about you and your family. So, we'll always thank you for that. We'll always be super close. But it's reassuring to know when you're out in other parts of the state that everything at home will also be taken care of by this department.
Well, thank you. That means a lot, and truly, I've been there, I've seen it, and that is one of my goals, is to make sure that these guys are supported, and that you all know that if you are out of town for 2-3 days, sometimes you leave out of here thinking you're going on a rescue that may be a couple hours, and you're gone for 48 hours because, it ends up being a lot worse than they expected or something. And so to make sure that we support you all in doing the work that you do, because we understand that it is hard to give up a couple of days and be gone from your family. And also we all know that when you are gone from your family, that's when things are going to happen.
Always.
When maybe things are going to break or ER visits are going to pop up. So that is something that we want to make sure we're doing.
Todd, you want to talk about a little bit about in terms of becoming a technician and the kind of the different levels of HTR and how it takes forever to hit that specialist level?
Of course, there's so many disciplines within HTR and the technical rescue field that it could take you months or years, depending on how you have to be very aggressive on getting training and possibly traveling for training to even accomplish that level of technician quickly. In terms of HTR, HTR realm, you have the vehicle rescuer. You also have, like Chief Shannon said, trench operations and confined space and rope rescues. You have water, and then you also have hazmat. So if you wanted to do the HTR realm, that's about 39 days, 40 days total to get all of those classes, and that does not even include then on top of that the collapse school specialty or the shoring specialty, which are a couple of days or weeks by themselves. In terms of hazmat, you have your technician, your chemistry, and then what they call the ATC classes, which those are each 2 weeks by themselves. So that's about 30 days just to get your hazmat certifications done. So that's a big strain on your family. And you would really need supportive command staff to allow you to go to those and to help you accomplish those and accomplish that specialty level.
It is a long program.
It is. I think the other piece to add to that is our training division. We talked about support. The training division plays a big part in this, and whether that's advocating to bring classes here or making sure that our folks are covered to go to these classes and things like that. So that's another relationship that is, very important for this team to be successful, is to make sure that we're working closely with them and making sure that we get folks signed up for these classes, and whether that's sending out information because there's a class 30 minutes away, or that they've had a contact with somebody that's an hour away and they need some people to fill a class and we can send some folks. So that's been really helpful too.
Overall, we're learning that emergency preparedness isn't just for first responders. It's something that the whole community can kind of have a role in. What are some of the biggest things that you wish people knew about staying prepared, or things that they could do to kind of make your job easier, kind of like a help us, help you type of situation?
So there's two pieces to that. I think number one is visit the RoanokeVA.gov website and scroll about halfway down on the page and sign up for Star City Alerts, because that's how we're going to share information, whether it's evacuation information, missing persons information, many different pieces, and you can opt into several different notifications in there. We're also working on a new program for disaster needs registry, so that'll be coming soon, and we'll be looking forward to sharing more information about that. The second piece is 72-hour preparedness, and I've taught a lot of classes on that. It's turned out to be very beneficial over the last few months because, as you know, we've had some pretty significant outages. Most recently, I can remember about 12,000 people being without power in the city of Roanoke. And so you can imagine that our fire and EMS gets inundated with calls during that time. Our police department gets inundated with calls. We had additional staffing. But you not sitting at home and relying on someone to come to your home because you're out of power and you didn't have enough food to get you through the night is really important. And so we do this 72-hour preparedness message, and we really encourage you to visit ready.gov to look at the different lists that you can have to build your own emergency preparedness kit. A lot of times you can build those kits for $50 to $100, and we really encourage that community-wide, right? So business owners, nonprofits, all these different sectors. I've met with several neighborhood groups and neighborhood watch groups to kind of encourage that 72-hour preparedness message. I think it's turned out to be successful. The last couple of storms we've had some certain areas of the city that have kind of bought into that 72-hour preparedness and understand the responsibilities of the community to be able to sustain for at least a couple of days. Unfortunately, just down the road in Franklin County, we sell homes without power for 10 days to 14 days. And so they had to do some things to be able to support that. But at least getting that first 72 hours out of the way is really beneficial.
Todd, from a firefighter's perspective, how can operations better prepare for a large-scale incident and work more effectively with the EM office?
I think one of the biggest things is we always, and we harp on it a lot in Roanoke City, is to train, to be ready for anything that comes our way, whether it is a large scale fire or a large scale CO call, a water rescue, right? We try and allow everybody to be well equipped and well trained for those events. I think at least that was from my understanding as a firefighter, and I think Chief Shannon does a good job with it. When emergency management comes into and comes to help with a large scale incident, it's not necessarily that emergency management's taking over. We're in charge now. It's how can I help you? How can I help you accomplish your goal and help you solve this incident? You might not need anything from me. You might just need a contact, or you might need food for the firefighters or something like that. But just how can I help, and how can our office help you be better suited for this incident that's occurring?
Yeah, it was really good. I know you guys Roanoke Fire-EMS really prides ourselves as like a whole department on being prepared and being aggressive in training and, just really trying to be a leader in the fire service. So it's really cool to see you guys doing that in like all branches of the department.
If you could give advice to somebody who might be interested in getting into the specialty teams or EM, what would it be?
I can start with specialty teams first. I would say the first step that you should do is contact your shift team lead, whether that's Captain Mooney for A shift or for HTR and Swiftwater, or your hazmat contact and your hazmat team lead. Talk to them, see what they would recommend. But you're going to need your initial classes. You're going to need your operations and your technician classes. So just start looking at classes online on the Virginia Department of Fire Programs website, and what classes are available near you. Just for emergency management, the classes I went over already. But biggest thing is talk to Chief Shannon, and he'll help you. He'll bend over backwards helping you. So just talk to him and show your interest, and he can get you started in the right direction.
Yeah, well, I think Todd said it well. Very good points on the specialty teams, and that's the same thing I encourage. Had a conversation with one of our recent recruits that asked about specialty teams, and I told him, you need to be involved. Number one, learn your job first. Your fire and EMS,
absolutely.
Your day-to-day stuff, and then ultimately, when you start to see that you really want to focus on something, reach out to those guys. From the emergency management perspective, yeah, Todd's right. I want you to call me. I want everyone in the city to understand emergency management. It's my responsibility to educate people so that they do understand what emergency management is. And so if you're interested in it, call me, and I will kind of talk to you about how my path went. It's not necessarily everybody's path, but everybody's got their own story and how they get involved in that. But I think the training piece is easy. That's very structured. The basic academy is 5 days, right? 5 days for the first class. But then there's the other piece of building relationships and getting out and networking, and hey, come to this meeting with me. We're going to go meet so-and-so. And those are the opportunities that you need to see and understand that you're going to be in a lot of meetings, right? I tell people that all the time. Spend a lot of time in meetings, but I enjoy it. I enjoy getting to know people and understanding what their roles and responsibilities are. But that's another piece of emergency management that you can't just blindly come into it and think you're going to just sit in an office all day, or you're going to run calls every day, because that's not what I do. Spend a lot of time out in the community.
Do you miss being in the field at all since you've gone into the office?
That's a great question. Yes, for sure. But I've actually really enjoyed the opportunity to have special operations, because that's gotten me back out into the field. When I came up into this role, my vision as a new emergency management coordinator was that I'll be out having lunch with the folks in the field, at the fire stations all the time. And I quickly realized that that's not the case, that I don't necessarily, it's not that I don't have time for that, but I have to prioritize lunch meeting at the firehouse or lunch meeting with XYZ company, corporate executive type individuals to talk about emergency management and how they can support the community. So, yes, certainly I miss being in the field with the folks running calls, but there's also that other piece where I get to come out. I now get to go to the hazmat meetings. I'm at the station with them, and I'm at Station 6 quite often, or I'm at the confined space training, and I'm on these deployment, meetings and briefings and involved with the field. So it's been great. I think there's a balance, and I think if that's something that I was going to tell Todd coming into a new role, like if Todd's goal is to sit in my shoes one day or in my chair one day, then I would tell him, make sure you have that balance and understand that it may sway one way or another sometimes, but you'll miss running calls. But ultimately a 2-alarm fire I'm coming in for, or a major gas leak at a location where we have to evacuate, I'm going to be responding, and so I still get the opportunity to come out and support. And again, that's a support role, not coming in to take over the incident, but to be there for the folks that are operating and responding and try to help them and make sure they have what they need.
Being an office neighbor with Trevor, I will say he does go to a lot of meetings. I can advocate for that. If you ever want to meet with Trevor, make sure you recommend a really great coffee shop. He knows all the good local ones around. So.
Or Duncan.
Well, Hope's got a very good point. I do spend a lot of time, but that's where you build relationships, right? And
Absolutely.
And I've had that conversation with people, but a lot of times people just enjoy sitting down and talking over a cup of coffee, and you get to know them really well. So kind of works out.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. So kind of wrapping up here, is there anything that we didn't highlight that you guys would kind of want to let the public or people in the field know about from an EM standpoint?
I think one thing I need to add is, we talked a lot about Todd and what Todd has done. We do have 3 other field EM specialists that are a part of this team, and so I don't want to go without mentioning that those 3 have been great, and all interested in emergency management and trying to support and getting more involved. So that's been really helpful. We got a couple different shifts represented there. The other piece is that emergency management is not just myself and Laura and Todd and the other EM specialists. It's the whole city, and it's the directors, and it's the leadership team, and it's the city manager and the mayor and all these different folks that make emergency management successful. And so our program wouldn't be where it is today without the support of all of our different leaders throughout the city of Roanoke, but also public safety partners that now understand and support emergency management, and recognizing that I don't just work for the Fire and EMS department. So I definitely want to give shout out to all the folks that are involved in emergency preparedness for the city of Roanoke, because I think it's a big part of what we do.
Awesome. So wrapping up, are there any big upcoming projects or trainings or initiatives that Roanoke's emergency management team is working on that we should keep an eye on or look out for?
Yes, there's a lot of big projects coming. We will be doing a full-scale exercise in the fall, winter coming soon. So we're working on planning for that now. Just met with another organization that's going to be doing some active threat training, and so we'll be involved in that. And then the other piece is we have our hazard mitigation plan that we're working on right now with the regional hazard mitigation plan. So that's a big venture. And then, of course, all of our special events that occur throughout the city of Roanoke, and trying to make sure that we're doing the best we can to prevent and mitigate hazards during special events in the city of Roanoke. So Laura Schmidt's been taking a big lead on that and really pushing that forward. So a lot going on, but it's a lot of good things happening, and we look forward to what's to come.
Awesome. Yeah, and if you're listening at home, you guys can keep up with all the things emergency management and from Roanoke Fire-EMS by following us on Facebook and Instagram. Be sure to subscribe and like the podcast, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Medic freeze on scene.
Second line, knock down the exterior fire.